So, good evening, everyone. My name is Victor Gordo, and I have the tremendous honor and privilege of serving as your mayor, and thank you for that. We're here tonight to talk about, an incident that occurred at the park, and so thank you, everyone, for making the time to come out. A lot of you are familiar faces because, like many of you, I live in the neighborhood. I live 2 blocks from Washington Park. And so I know the park well. I drive by the park nearly every day. My kids and family go to the park. And so to have this occur in any one of our parks in the city is absolutely not acceptable. So we wanted to bring everyone together to talk about, one, the facts. Now, don't be surprised that you hear from the police chief or the staff that not all of the facts, as they know them or believe them to be true, can be shared in a public setting. This is an ongoing investigation. It's a complicated investigation, and it may get even more complex and complicated. So you may hear from the police chief that he cannot share everything that he knows or that he believes or that his officers believe. And so I want to state that out front in order that people can understand that we're not trying to withhold information. We're just trying to share what we can. We're also joined by the police chief as well as our city manager, Miguel Marquez. Chief Harris has various members of his department here, and our city manager also has quite a few department heads here. And Councilmember Rivas and Jones are also here, and I'll turn it over to them for a few comments. But look, what happened at the park is another reminder of why we need to address the issue of substance abuse and mental health in our city. And it's not a surprise, and it shouldn't surprise anyone, that I believe that's a part of what was happening at this park. And it's happening in every part of our city, and probably every part of our country. And so when we talk about these issues, we also have to have solutions. Some of those solutions, and I'll let others talk about them, will be long-term. Some of them will be immediate issues that we can take up immediately here at the park. But don't be surprised to hear that some of these issues will take a little bit longer in order to address the mental health and substance issues in our city. With that, let me turn it over quickly to Councilmember Rivas, who represents this part of our city, and then followed by Councilmember Jones, who actually grew up, 2 or 3 houses away from the park, so he knows this part of our city very, very well.
Thank you for staff for putting this together as well on short notice. It kind of takes a lot. It doesn't look like much, but it takes a lot to put this together within a matter of days. But it was important that we did it because public safety is paramount. It's for sure one of my top priorities. I'm sure it's the mayor's and my colleagues on the council's priorities and all staff's priorities. At a fundamental level, that's what the city has to ensure, that we're safe in our neighborhoods and our parks. And this is personal to me. This is my neighborhood. This is where my kids go to the parks. As many of you know, I lived in Washington Square for a number of years, and we're now in Bungle Heaven, just across the street, very close to this gas station where one of the incidences took place. We're going to hear from the police department. So it hits home because it is home. We're going to hear more details from the police department about what exactly went on and what their investigation has shown so far and what they were able to accomplish. And I want to take a moment at this point to thank the police department for their hard work, their very professional work and speedy work. They were able to identify a suspect relatively quickly, make an arrest before any more incidents were able to occur. So I'm very grateful and very relieved for that. So one key takeaway that I have had from the past week or so, and I think you all should too as well, and I hope you do after hearing everything tonight, is that the person that the police department identified as a suspect, who we believe committed a series of horrific acts, that person is off the streets. They're under arrest. They're no longer a threat. And again, that's a huge relief. But that alone is not enough. You know, we can't just pat ourselves on the back and move on and think everything's going to be fine. We all know that's not the case. So the second and perhaps most important thing to come out of this meeting is, what are we going to do to make sure Washington Park and all our neighborhoods are as safe as they possibly can be for all of us to enjoy? And Washington Park in particular is a unique park. I think you all know it's set a little bit below street level, lots of interesting nooks and crannies to get around and explore, which makes it a fun park to visit, but also inviting for other less desirable activities to happen. So there are a whole host of ways to address this, and we're going to hear from different departments on what those ways are. For example, you know, lighting, security cameras, more park safety specialists, increased patrols, programming, et cetera. There's all these things we can do and we are doing and we're looking at. But this isn't the staff's park. This isn't the city council's park. It's your park. So we're here tonight and every day to hear what you want to see, and to hear your responses to the ideas we've started bouncing around. And so we're putting together something that we can all be excited about and we know is going to make us all safer. So thank you so much. And with that, I'll hand it over to Councilmember Jones.
And this does hit home. I grew up in Pasadena. I lived about a few blocks away from, or actually half a block away from this park. I played there as a child. And I remember the evolution of just the area, right? There used to be a liquor store, wait for the 268, there was a liquor store across the street, and then, you know, the city council got rid of the liquor store, and they built some residential housing there. And so the area has improved significantly. But what I've heard from District 3 residents was some of their concerns about what's going on at the park. And so, you know, this incident is one too many, and so what I did was I contacted the city manager, the police chief, and we talked about immediate solutions. And so one of them was recommended was additional funding for park safety specialists, which I believe we have on our agenda today, and we'll talk about. But really, what this meeting is today or tonight is to hear from you all, to hear what the issue is and what you would like to see done. And so before I turn over the mic, I would just like to just do a quick poll, just a show of hands. How many of you think there should be increased lighting in the park overnight? Okay. What about increased cameras in the park? Okay. How about, is the neighborhood being over-patrolled? Okay. Is it being patrolled just enough? No. Do you want more police patrols? Yes. I know, we talked, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think this is good feedback for the city staff and for us, because we're here to take direction from you. We represent you, we work for you. So, you know, hear from city staff, ask them questions, connect with them, connect with us as council members. Say that again?
Things have been really good except for this.
That's good, that's good. And so connect with everyone, and then so thank you for being here, and I'll pass it over to...
Let me, before I introduce the city manager, let me say, you know, it's, you know, Bob, I hear you when you say things have been fine, but let me say we've made many improvements. We've made many improvements. You know, Councilmember Jones talked about the liquor store, and some of us were part of that battle to get rid of that liquor store, and that made a tremendous improvement, certainly with the affordable housing there. We made improvements at the park itself, but we know that we have to stay on top of the issues, particularly at this park because of the way it's set geographically. I mean, people find it convenient, so I'll quote Councilmember Rivas when she said, this sometimes appears to be two parks, right? There's the daytime park that we all see and love, and then there are things that happen and have been happening at the park when most of us are asleep. And so this is a reminder that we have to be vigilant about what happens at all of our parks, including this park, when we aren't there. We have to ensure that we have the proper staffing within the police department, within recreation and parks, within public works, and that they have the tools needed to address what happens at the park when we're not there, and when we are asleep, and when others do come to the park, and this is evidence that it does happen. So while I agree that this is a great neighborhood, and we shouldn't stigmatize it, this is a great neighborhood, and it's a great park, but we have to be vigilant about what's happening when we're resting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our city manager, Miguel Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to see almost a standing room only kind of gathering here. And it's an important reason we're here. And I think we have some good news to share. I think Councilmember Rivas alluded to the fact that there was a person who committed multiple crimes. And I think our police chief will tell you a little bit about that. But she's also right, as is Councilmember Jones, that we have more to do. So just by way of background, only because I was asked earlier today, what does a city manager do? Who are you? I've been here for about 14 months as a city manager. I'm hired by the city council to be the administrative head of the city and its public servants. And there's 2,300 of us. We do things like the police department. I get to hire the police chief and the fire chief and all of our other departments. So just to give you a sense of, we're here to listen to you. We're here to tell you what we know where we can, and we're here to listen to you. So apart from the police chief, other department heads, I have Tony Olmos, I'll ask you to raise your hand, head of public works. Coco Panosian, he is our director of parks, that's Parks, Recreation, Community Services. Bill Wong, he is the director of housing. I have also Lisa Derdarian, who's our public information officer. Brenda Harvey Williams, who's in the back there, maybe she can stand up. She's one of my assistant city managers. Manuel Carmona, who is our acting director of public health. And I don't know if I missed any other department head who was here, but there's also all of their staff. You can just look around and see all the police officers who are here. I see our city engineer back there. We're all here to listen. We want to hear from you. We want you to know that we are here to listen. And it's not just that this was in the paper. This was the latest shooting victim was someone whose brother was famous. This, sadly, we live in a world where there are a lot of guns. We just can't deny that. There are a lot of drugs. There's mental illness. The mayor alluded to some of that. But when I first got here back in August of 2022, the very next month there was a shooting at Villa Park. And that next Monday, we had a community meeting. More recently, there was a shooting. No one was killed, but people were shot at Community Arms. And we had a community meeting at Community Arms. And then maybe 2 or 3 months ago, we had a shooting at King's Villages. And we had a community meeting there. And unfortunately, we had the shootings here at Washington Park, and we're having our community meeting. So I want you to understand, we're here to serve you. We're here to listen to you. I also you'll hear tonight various presentations. Whenever it's warranted, we will make the strategic, proactive investment to keep communities safe. So you hear some of the things we're thinking about, including looking at the lighting at Washington Park and deploying all the resources we can, the people, personnel, the technology that helps us find the bad guys and keep you all safe. We're committed to doing that. And finally, the last thing I'll close with, because we don't want to spend too much time talking to you, we want to hear from you, is I'll say that we're going to try to do our best, our level best as public servants to keep you safe and do our part. But to keep all of us safe requires all of us to be all in on safety. That means you're our eyes and ears. You need to call in when you see something, say something, and we'll be there. We'll do our part. You all need to do your part. But with that, I will stop talking and turn it over to our police chief so he can give you a report on what we know and what we're trying to do to keep you safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Thanks first and foremost to all of you for being here. It's absolutely important and crucial that we are here in support of each other, in support of one another in this community. That's what makes this place special. And it's good to see you all here being concerned about what's going on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time up here talking, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a report on some of the things that may be top of mind for you. One of those things is to just let you know that we don't have to wait until there's some type of violent act or something like that to have these community meetings. Part of what the police department wants to do, part of our contemporary rebranding, is making sure that we meet when you need us to meet, especially from a public safety perspective. Not everybody can meet all the time. You might imagine running a city is very, very important for the city manager and those folks behind me. So there's a whole lot for them to do. But there are opportunities for, certainly with your police department and your fire department and other public safety endeavors, to get us together on a regular basis, since we are kind of the 24-hour segment of the police department or the city, and we can kind of make ourselves available. So right out of the gate, I'll let you know that with regard to Washington Park, a review of the statistics demonstrates that overall, Washington Park's a very safe place. You should be happy to have a park that has that amount of beauty, that amount of safety, and that amount of accessibility for members of this community. We take pride in trying to make sure that you get an opportunity to utilize the services and utilize that park. And we love to watch kids and people out here doing their thing. This was, in my opinion, an anomaly. If we look at the statistics from 2022 into 2023, this particular heinous crime occurred at the end and accounts for almost 55% of any Part 1 crimes that we've had in the park. So that's a big deal that we are here because of this one incident, this serial assaulter who came out here and really wreaked havoc on this area. But our investigative section, our patrol section, and some of the other folks represented behind you here in uniform actually came out and put that thing in hand as quickly as possible. So it did not take long to identify a suspect, did not take long to work up the services, the search warrants, and the other things we needed to take appropriate enforcement action. And as a result, that person is now in jail, and I believe is going to be there for a very, very, very long time. I'd like to reiterate that it was not because there was a famous person attached to this case that made it a priority for us. I know that sometimes as soon as we say that, the first thing we think about is, yeah, right, if it was just somebody else, would you have done the same thing? Well, I'm here to tell you that that is absolutely the case. If you look back at any of the cases, certainly the violent cases that have occurred in the city over the course of this year, our investigation, robbery homicide section, our street crimes unit, and certainly some of our other elements have come out here and taken some really bad people off the streets. And that's a good thing for people in this community. So the people are here and poised to answer those questions directly when we get through with this report. And you can meet some of the command staff and the investigative staff to get those questions answered. With regard to this particular incident, we had a shooting that was a shot spotter alert back on October 29th of this year. There were no 911 calls on this particular call, so the officers went to the park to try and ID where we might have a problem, and they found a person who was shot and bleeding profusely from the neck. As a result of their life-saving efforts, they were able to get that person to the hospital where he is alive today because of those efforts and because of that particular technology. Following that, we had a couple of other acts of violence, including the one you heard mentioned at a gas station in this area, where this particular suspect pointed a gun at somebody and was creating a problem, being very assaultive, but fortunately did not take any action against that particular person, but certainly created a problem for members of the community. And we tied him to that using various levels of technology that I can't go into right now, but just certainly using the technology and certainly the investigative prowess of our folks to tie these things together. And then ultimately we had this particular shooting case where we, again, were alerted by a shot spotter alert and were able to get out there and determine that we had a victim, and then worked from that particular piece of the puzzle and worked it back to identify a suspect using video, using multiple different types of technology, and certainly some trade secrets that clearly I can't go into, but we were able to work him up very, very quickly. And then through the help of some of our local, state, and some of our federal partners, we were able to get him into custody, where we have kind of removed him from this community. As you heard the mayor say, sometimes we're talking about things like drug addiction. We're talking about sometimes the lack of services for people to be attached to. Those are all elements of this that create sometimes the opportunities for these things to happen. What our goal is as a team, an executive team, is to address all of those issues. So through a comprehensive plan, you have people from the Department of Public Health here, you have people from Public Works, as was mentioned, certainly the fire department, the police department, and our parks folks. We want to work together to solve this problem using the 3 E's. And for me, the first one is education. That's what this is about. We're here to educate and inform and be educated and get informed primarily from you folks. Then there's the engineering solution, which is why you have some of the other folks here that can talk about lighting and can talk about high visibility and can talk about shrubs and can talk about a lot of the things that can be preventative when it comes to illegal activity and some of the other activity that you heard mentioned by a council member. And the last E is enforcement. And that's where we come in. We want to make sure that enforcement sometimes is the last thing. We don't want to become over-policing the areas. We don't want to make it a place that doesn't look appealing. The quality of life that you have in this community is very important to us. But where it's necessary, we are definitely making sure that we show up. One of the things that's important to recognize is that with just the park, we ran a statistic on the park from 2022 to 2023. And we've had roughly 288 instances where the police have made an observational interaction, where we've been in the park and then see something happen or address something or just simply come to the park to be seen. 288 of those. On the other side, there's 78 still civilian call-ins or 911 calls or calls for service. That's a big difference. That means that we are here quite often. And though you may not see us all the time, we're here. Sometimes we're laying low in playing cars, and sometimes we're highly visible in marked units. And sometimes our investigative units are out here looking at everything that's going on from the sky. You never know where we might be paying attention, but we are always here to try to make sure things are happening. So that's a big number. That means that you are getting the service from law enforcement, and in particular, park safety. Our park safety officers are spending an inordinate amount of time inside the parks trying to provide for your safety. You heard mentioned that there's a move to potentially increase services. We are evaluating that, and we're having meetings on how to increase our park services group and do that effectively and certainly within the cost perspectives of what we need to do in the city. But should we do that, those people will be deployed in such a manner that it provides a lot of additional safety for you folks. Also, a civilian person is being contemplated so that we can use them for internal administrative things to free up more hours for us to be visible and in the parks and extend that coverage and that service. That is an awesome idea that we're trying to bring to fruition. Some of that came from Councilmember Jones when we sat down and really had some in-depth discussions, but it is now a team effort to try and bring that to fruition. So if you listen to some of the things that are happening out in the world, you would think that Pasadena is overrun with crime. The fact is that violent crime is down in Pasadena by an average of about 16%. And so we're happy about that. There's many reasons for that. Your police services, certainly the rest of the services that are creating quality of life, a great quality of life in the city. And then a lot of it has to do with you folks who are willing to call and willing to see something, say something, and certainly be a part of the community safety that we're all responsible for. So there are a lot of things that are in place. I'm going to dial this down a little bit and hand this back off to who's next. But my staff, me, and most of the others will all be here to answer questions directly so that you can get individual attention from the police department. So next up, I think we're bringing up Tony Olmos from our Public Works Department.
I've been with the city now for 2 years. I've been in this business now for a very long time, so I have quite a bit of experience in dealing with lighting and other things. My department is in charge of a lot of things in the public right-of-way, meaning the street area, including the street lights. In particular to parks, since I have the expertise, I have staff on board that actually has expertise in doing lighting. So we are also in charge of the lighting in the parks. That's my role in this situation. So after the incident, I sent my staff out to do a very preliminary assessment of the existing lighting system that's there. I also learned that about 10 years ago, the system that's there was upgraded from. Well, there's three separate light setup out there. You have the parking lot lighting, you have lighting that lights up all the walkways within the park, and then you have lighting that lights up the sports courts, the basketball courts, the handball courts, etc. So once we went out there, we determined that, when looking at the walkway lights, that they were put in about 10 years ago. We went from 22 lights to about 38. These lights have a service life of about 10 years, so it's about that time that we're starting to look at them already to see if there's any upgrades that are needed to be done to the system. So what we found immediately was that there were about 4 lights that were not functioning properly, so we're looking to replace those. They're kind of unique. They're a post-top light, so we just can't go and buy one off the shelf and come in and replace it, so we have to go find a specific model that we would do that. So we're working on that right now to at least replace the ones that are there. Then our next step is then to look at if we need any enhanced lighting, to enhance the lighting that's there now. We did find a few dark spots right near the baseball field, and there's like a ravine right down the middle on the lower part that are dark. We're looking to see if we can, add some lighting there. But we also need to balance that out with how much lighting is too much lighting. You do have neighbors that are there. So when we evaluate these things, we have to take that into consideration and see and work with the neighbors to see what is the right amount of lighting. Typically, the parking lot lights are one intensity, and the other parking lot lights there that are in front of the new community house. And usually the walkway lights inside the park are about half the intensity, but we'll look at that. So we have to do an evaluation to make sure that we understand, what the conditions are, and then see what's going to be right going forward. Like the chief was saying, to help enhance safety so that they have the visibility when they go out there and look, and they're observing to see who's in the park. They can see that from a distance. But at the same time, the people that live nearby, they don't have light shining directly into their house, when we do put that in. So we have to be very careful in the way we approach it, and that's what we intend to do. So my report was really short. It's just to talk about that. I know I'm going to turn it over shortly to our new director of parks, and he's going to talk more specifically about some of the things that are going. I know that there was an interest about cameras. And that's something that we're obviously looking into. There are cameras around some of the parks, and this is one of them that was being considered for that. So I know that Coco's going to talk about that. So with that, I'll be available for questions, whether it's on the panel here or I'll stay after the meeting as well if you have any one-on-one questions, and I'll be happy to have that conversation with you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Coco.
Good evening, everyone. As Tony said, I am the new director of parks. I've been on the job for 7 weeks now, going on my 8th week. So it's still the new car smell still on me. And as the chief said, everybody has mentioned here, this is not a one-size-shoe-fits-all approach. We're looking at it from multiple angles. It's a partnership between police, parks, our offices, mayor's office, council member's office, and the community to help us identify what's going on and be able to find solutions. Safety patrol is one of the options for us to be considering, which is enhanced. As a park director, I want the parks to be safe and people coming to the parks to feel safe, to be able to use the parks. The lighting with our partners in Public Works that already have enhanced, they're looking at it. Working with the Department of Information Technologies, do it for the cameras that we just mentioned. As you heard, the new Washington House that our friends at Public Works just finalized, we're going to be opening that community house in January, so bear with us. We're almost there. And when that opens up, the last thing we're going to be adding to the mix is a lot of activities. I'm a firm believer, and statistics show that when you activate a location, when people are coming to a site, you're actually enhancing the activities you want at a facility, what is intended for its use, and then some of the elements that are not wanted in a facility will slowly start dissipating. So as we look at opening that Washington Park House, there are a number of programs that we've already looked at. I list a few that staff sent over being considered. Tiny Tots, program for the little ones, pre-K, 2 to 5 year olds that parents and then nannies bring them to the park. We have programs for them. We're looking at basketball and tennis programs for youth, Get Fit programs for youth and adults. We're looking at some walking classes, arts in the park, open handball for adults, adaptive open play for adults. We're looking at establishing handball tournaments down at the courts. We're looking at having summer camp at the site. These are some of the programs being considered, and as soon as we get the Washington House opened up, work with the details of what the program should include, we will be activating it. It's likely going to be throughout the day. We're going to have staff there and activities within the House, and the House is also going to be open for the community to come and use for things that you want. You want to have, special events, and so reach out to the Parks Department. We'll figure out a way to get you, some spots in there and some time. But ultimately, it's going to come down to us all working together to make this a facility that we all feel safe coming and enjoying. It is designed for the community to enjoy as a park, whether it's passive or active. As you heard, the park is open until 10. The lights are on for basketball and the handball and the tennis courts. So the more people that use it during the evening hours also, it's going to feel like it is crowded, and it's going to keep it safer, in my opinion. And with the support of our police officers and the Park Safety Patrol Unit, which we love, it's going to make it feel even more so. And as we mentioned, cameras, the new house does have cameras installed. When we get the building going, it's going to be taking care of the security, camera security up in the upper level. And then going forward, we'll be working, like we said, with Tony's office and then with Department of Information Technology to look at additional security cameras, assessing them where and how, working with PD to look at the lower areas of the park. And with that, I will be here if you have any questions. And thank you very much. I turn it back over to Mr. Mayor Gordo.
Thank you. So we'll just, as you can see, it's a comprehensive approach involving the physical aspect of the park as well as programming of the park and increasing park safety specialists. But, I always say to remind all of us, and when you see something, you got to say something. And some of us drive by the park and see activity and don't report it. Don't ever be shy about reporting it, because the statistics often drive the service. So if you don't report it, the police department looks at the number of calls for service. And they're very good about tracking that as a barometer, if you will, to tell them where activity is occurring, because they can't be everywhere all of the time. And so they rely on all of us as eyes and ears as well. So why don't we open it up to questions? Phil?
Yeah, just two questions. One, I'm loud. You had mentioned that the light bulbs that went out, now the 4, they're older and it's going to take time to replace them. Why are you going back to the old light bulb that you find a hard time replacing? If it's time to replace them, get a light bulb that's easy to replace. I mean, that shouldn't be that difficult of a thing to do. Why are you going to repeat the same mistake? So the next light goes out, we got to wait more time. So that's just one thing. I don't really need an answer for that. It's just a suggestion. The other one is around, and we've been here, my family been here since 29. And that's been one of my favorite parks other than Brookside. But I've noticed two things. You put a beautiful wrought iron fence all the way around the Rose Bowl, which provides a lot of security. And who's it down there? Lacey Park did the same thing. And if you had a nice decorative fence, not a chain link, because that's easy to get over, but a nice decorative fence around there that can be locked up, it's going to prevent the people from running in and out. If you're doing a drug trade, you want to get in and out, and those wrought irons are hard to climb. And if you I did landscaping, so you put a little angle on there with this little peak on there, might prevent a whole lot of stuff that happens at night. And I think a lot of people feel a lot safer knowing that I can't get in that yard, because what happens when the police come there at night, they can run out, they escape through the yards. But if there's a fence around there, they're not escaping that way. It'd be a lot less people to go in, and fences are cheaper than personnel.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I'll go ahead and respond to the lighting question just real quick, and then I'll turn it over to our Director of Parks to talk about any type of potential fencing. The reason we just can't go out and buy those lights right now, when we first put them in about 10 years ago, they were proprietary. The posts are proprietary, so they require specialized bulbs that we have to find. Like I said earlier, we can't go out and just find them on the shelf. And we'll try. We have really good engineers and people from our technical staff. If they can retrofit something in there, they will. So we're trying our hardest to try to find something that we can retrofit in there. In the long term, we're looking at replacing all the poles in there because, like I said, their service life is just about up. So I'm not sure if Coco can talk about the fencing a little bit.
Thanks, Tony. On the fencing, I could just simply say that we'll evaluate and look at it to see if it's ideal and feasible for this location. Given the way the park is laid out, it kind of makes it a slightly more challenging because it has multiple access points. So it's something we'll look into and evaluate as we go forward for the safety of the park as well.
Young lady, you want to stand up and maybe go to the microphone?
I mostly just had a clarifying question. So both for the instance that happened on October 29th and for this one in Washington, did nobody call those in and you relied on the technology to kind of know that something was going on?
On October 29th, there were no 911 calls, so it was the ShotSpotter alert that we relied upon. And for those who don't know what ShotSpotter is, quite simply, it's a series of microphones that allow us to track gunshots, specifically designed to locate and triangulate gunshots. And so that system allowed us to get to the scene and offer rapid medical aid to that individual, and it eventually saved his life. We also had a ShotSpotter alert on this last incident. Unfortunately, we were not able to get there in time or, due to other circumstances, provide the life-saving aid that would save his life. But we did have some 911 calls on that one.
And then my other question is in terms of evaluating our other parks. For this one, it was noted that the park lights needed to be changed right about the 10-year mark. So I'm wondering if the other parks in the Northwest region are also being evaluated ahead of time.
The short answer is yes. We had a pretty big project that goes back to the early 2010s, where we replaced lighting at some of the other parks. So that's being evaluated as well. Each project costs about $500,000, so that's why we have to be systematic on evaluating and then planning as to how we're going to fund the rest of the projects going forward.
Can I just say one thing about, we've said if you say something, see something. If it's an emergency, call 911. That's the best way to get the help you need there. Dispatch center, they can get all the right people over. Sometimes I've heard that people, want to stay out of it. They don't want to get involved. They for a variety of reasons. Everyone has their own reason. There's a way to make an anonymous report. The number is 744-4241. So 911 calls are the best way in an emergency, but it's recorded and it's a public record. You should know that. But if you just want to let us know so that we can do something about it and you want to stay anonymous, 744-4241. Provide that information. The police department will get it, and they won't even, if you say, I choose to be anonymous, they won't ask you who you are, and then we have the information and we can act on it. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Marisela Gonzalez. I've lived here all my life. Me and my husband were born and raised here. I'd like to note that Washington Park has never been a park that any of us really wanted to go to. Now that I have kids and I still live in the neighborhood, I think it's very important that parents like me show up to things like this so that way you can see my face, you see my kids, you know who they are, because the park has never been like, oh, that's the park we need to go to or want to go to. And that's awful because since I've been in high school, since I've been in middle school, it's never been like, oh, that park is safe. You know what I'm saying? So, and I'm about 32 years old now. So my question to you, is where is the ShotSpotter if you can give that information out?
I can't give that information out.
Okay. And then when calling the emergency hotline, I've run into issues with the operator, and they're kind of rude. And they go, what do you want us to do about it? So being a person who rents here, and I have family members who pay house taxes here, like when you call to report certain things and you get those people answering those phone calls and saying, well, what do you want us to do about it? Well, your job, right? Like we report these things so that way people come to our neighborhood to check it out, right? So I just wanted to run that across. And then my other question is, when is the estimated timeline on the fixtures, on when the patrols are going to take place When are the lights are going to be changed? When are the cameras going to be installed, if there are any cameras there?
So let me deal with the service-oriented question first for the police department. Two things. One, when you call us, there is absolutely no rationale for somebody on our team to be rude to you. If that's the case, you can call my office directly and I'll take care of it. Mm-hmm. Part of our rebranding efforts that we're trying to put in place is understanding how important our relationship with the community is, and to build that trust, to rebuild that trust in the cases where we've lost it. But most importantly, we've started implementing things like block walks, where we make people, our officers, everybody in uniform, get out and come and talk to people just to introduce themselves, so we all get to know each other by first name. That's one of the changes that we're doing in the parks, in the neighborhoods. And so far, we've had thousands of contacts so that we get to know each other. Gone have to be the days where we drive by and we're not waving at people, right, or that we're driving by acting like, we run things, because that's not the case. The idea is to stop and come and talk to you when there's not a crisis, so we get to know each other. The other part of it, just for your edification, when you call 911, there are activities going on that you can't see on the phone sometimes. So while they're talking to you on the phone, there's another dispatcher that's dispatching the units and doing those kind of things. Mm-hmm. So know that there's activity going on behind the scenes, but rudeness will never be tolerated. Mm-hmm. Thank you. As far as the other issues, I'll turn that over to.
Thank you.
So our first step is to do that evaluation for the lighting to see what's needed. And once we identify what's needed, and especially if we're going to do any kind of significant replacement of the existing lighting, we have to identify what the cost is, and then what we have to do is put it into our capital improvement program that goes through a budget process that takes through that'll take through the beginning of next year. And then once we put in the capital improvement program, if there's funding identified for a specific project, then the funds kick in July 1st, and then everything will start from there. Because we do have to put a design together. There has to be plans put together, and then we have to advertise for bids and then go out and get a contractor to do this. Or we'll evaluate whether we can do that with in-house staff. But the first step is we have to do an evaluation, so at least we know exactly what the need is going to be. And on the cameras, just like Director Coco was saying, that's something that also needs to be evaluated and costed out and figured out exactly what that looks like. And then we go through the same capital improvement program process.
Thank you.
There was a question that came in on a card that was asking how many calls have we had at Washington Park. Over the last year, we've had 78 calls for service and 288 officer-initiated activities, up to and including the block walks that I discussed, and going in, doing observational walkthroughs and what we call foot beats. So 288 of those, about 78 calls for service. Most of those calls for service were municipal code related, drug-related offenses. Not too many of those, very small number of those were violent offenses or assaults. So we're really trying to take a look at making sure that we are present in the hours that we're having some of those quality of life issues, so that we can address those for all of you folks.
Hi. I first of all want to thank the Pasadena Police Department for apprehending the man who committed this crime against one of our houseless residents. And I do know that Tony Z does a lot for our community regarding the houseless, people who are struggling with drug addiction, people living on our streets. And I just wanted to know, can somebody address that when gun violence meets the houseless? It's a volatile situation, and somebody lost their life. I know this man from him walking in my neighborhood, and he never would have hurt a soul. And it was a senseless killing, and I just want to have a moment of silence for that man.
Thank you for that. I agree with everything that you said. There is a tragic element to anybody who falls victim to gun violence, so no one is more tragic than the other. They are all tragedies in our opinion. In this case, I'm going to describe it like our detective lieutenant did at the beginning of the case. The person that we were dealing with here was diabolically evil and had made a decision that he was going to inflict that evil upon this community. And as a result, we ended up with some injured people and one deceased. And so our goal is to try to address these things ahead of time. What was missed, what services might have been allocated, had there been calls that we'd been on with this person. We're still conducting that analysis to ensure that we never have a repeat of this. You heard the city manager and the mayor talk about, I think, a little bit about the times. We're working within those times to try and solve a lot of these problems. But that is why the entire team is here, and it's not just the police department, because there are so many components to it. So we're working on addressing all of those things.
Thank you, Chief. I'm Natalie Salazar. I'm a second-generation native Pasadenan. I grew up over here on Michigan Avenue, spent a lot of time in this library and a lot of time in Washington Park. I just wanted to remind you, I'm also the executive director of Crime Stoppers, and it's right there to your right for our city manager. We have been a nonprofit partner to the police department, to the city, and all the cities in Los Angeles County and law enforcement agencies. We provide an anonymous way for anybody to call, text, or email in any crime tip if for whatever reason they are fearful of getting involved. Of course, in an emergency, we want you to call 911. We have to work together with our local law enforcement agencies. But if you want to get information out and you want to be truly anonymous, we've got an 800 number, we have a mobile app, we have a way of submitting tips on our website with all the election languages. I have information over on the table in English and in Spanish, and I know that Lisa also has some information over here too. But please don't discount the fact we average maybe 15 to 20 tips from people that come in just for Pasadena Police Department itself. And those go out to the police department in real time. No one knows your name, no one knows your address, your email address, so there's no fear of retaliation. So please just remember, it's another resource for you, and it's all about working together. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Christina Gonzalez. I live here on Palm Terrace, and I just want to say thank you so much to the Pasadena mayor and everybody for putting this meeting together. I think it's incredibly important. And Chief Harris, thank you so much for keeping us safe. And you and your colleagues have done a great job. Anyhow, I have two questions. My first question is, can you tell us a little bit about this person who killed Mickey Cooper? Did he have a mental illness? What was his issue? Is he from this community?
Well, other than telling you that he was, as my lieutenant put it, diabolically evil, the investigation is still ongoing. We have a lot that we have to work up. So there'll be an opportunity for me to provide that information to you at a later date. Right now, I hesitate to put information out that might compromise the investigation.
Okay, I understand. Mr. Marquez did bring up the fact that there was a shooting at Villa Park a while back. What changed there afterwards? What were the safety measures that you implemented to prevent another shooting?
Well, some of the things that we've done up to and including the implementation of what we call our street crimes unit. We've reinvented, I think, what gang intervention and gang investigation is about. We've tried to move away from more of the heavy-handed 1970s, 80s approach to a more surgical approach in how we identify criminals and identify those people who would wreak havoc within the neighborhood. So we've combined our gang investigators with our neighborhood action team and brought a community feel to it, which forces that particular unit to do a lot of things outside the normal gang gang investigation element. So getting out there and doing bike patrols and getting out there and doing the block walks. Everybody's required to do that, and I don't think that was the case in years past, but it's been very effective for us now. Additionally, we're working well with the team that's been assembled by our city manager, working well in solving problems on the front end. So some of these things you're hearing about lights and about fences and about just engineering solutions, those things are happening through effective communication between the police department and public works, police department and parks, police department and fire, police department and public health, and some of the others within the city, certainly housing and the others. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we're using communication and effective approaches to solve problems before they become police problems. If we can address those issues before that shooting happens, then we've been successful.
If I may ask one more question, how often are drugs and mental abuse or mental illness the cause of any kind of violence in this city?
Often.
Then why aren't we focusing more on mental illness and drug abuse as solutions. I mean, I think putting lights up and fences are great, but can we address the root cause?
I think we are.
Thank you.
I think we are as a team addressing those root causes. But the reality of things is we have to make sure that the things that we can fix, we fix, and there's certain things that we have to address, and we're going to continue to address them. There's a larger looming issue, whether it's countywide, statewide, that go far beyond the borders of Pasadena, that have to all come into congruence for us to really be effective with dealing with some of those issues. We're talking about people through the DA's office. We're talking about people at the state level. We're talking about public services. So there's a lot of elements. It grows, it proliferates as we start seeing some of these things happen. We're working at that at the borders of Pasadena and working with our state and federal partners to try and improve on that. So we're approaching it. We're dealing with it.
Good evening. My name is Betty Turner, and my view every day is the park. It's like Malibu looking at their water. That's my house. I knew Mickey personally. 2 weeks ago, he passed by me and I say, "Are you Michael Cooper brother?" He said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Did Michael come and see about you?" He said, "Yes." So I said, "I'm gonna tell you how you know me." I said, "I used to live on Garfield in a little white house with an iron fence." He said, "Yes, you had 2 boys used to play basketball. My brother played basketball." I said, "Yes, I know your brother. Not personally, but I knew you. You walked by, and my husband asked you was your whole conversation." So I say, have you ate? He said, "No." I said, "Here, I only have $5 in my pocket. Take him and get you some food." I see homeless people every day, bad, mentally ill. I saw this morning, using profanity. See this young lady every day using profanity. She ran up behind me and say, all kind of language. I said, "Lady, don't get behind me. You don't know what I have in my purse." But this is to say this and say that. A man jumped over in my yard, and I called the police. They said me on the phone, said, "I'm gonna go, and I'm going to send someone out." And she kept on asking, "What did the man say?" I can tell you one thing, he have a long ponytail with red pants on. The police officer never did come. My husband had left. No one that was me. The guy couldn't get out of my fence. He said, "I want to get out." I said, "You better jump out like you jumped in." So this is what I'm saying. There's a lot of activities going over in that park. I heard that shooting. The police came to my house at 4 o'clock that morning. And that shooting was before 4 o'clock. That shot was at 1:30 or 2 o'clock because my daughter works late and she just came in. She said, "Mama, there was a shot." Then about an hour later, there was another shot. I hear everything go on in that park because I'm a neighborhood watch. I know mostly every homeless person because I give them money. Because we one day short of being homeless ourselves. So you have to be careful how you treat these people. They're mentally ill and they need help. Pasadena is not helping their people like they should. So you all need to, I don't know. I walk the beat every day. I'm like a police officer too because I'm a neighborhood watch. I walk down this street and I see I know all these homeless people know me. They call me Aunt Betty. So I'm letting you know, it's activities going in that park and you need to do better.
In light of those comments, let me turn it over to our director from Department of Public Health, Manuel Carmona.
And I worked in this for Huntington Hospital for 32 years as service.
Well, thank you for your service and thank you for sharing your story. Good evening, everyone. My name is Manuel Carmona, Acting Director of Public Health. I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing through our PORT team, which is the Pasadena Outreach and Response Team. We have a couple of our members on the team here tonight. We have our firefighter, Tony Z. We have our nurse from Huntington Health, Patty. We have our program coordinator, Nathan Press, over to our side. If you haven't heard about the PORT team, it speaks directly to what Aunt Betty was just talking about. The PORT team proactively patrols our streets, and they have a multidisciplinary team that really focuses on building relationships with people who are unhoused so that we can build authentic relationships in advance before they actually fall into crisis. They start with little things like bringing them coffee or tea or something to drink, something to eat, transporting them to different resources in our community, like places like getting their driver's license or getting their birth certificate. And we slowly build up that relationship so that over time, when they do need help and they're ready to get off the streets, when they're ready to go to a substance abuse treatment center or access mental health resources, we're right there by their side. They trust us. Tony and our teams will actually take them to their appointments. And we're able to very happily announce that since we started this program in June of 2019, we've helped 85 individuals transition from the streets into some type of transitional housing. That's a huge success for our city. In addition, we established a second team a year and a half ago that has helped, that's basically receiving phone calls directly from the 911 dispatch at our police department. So instead of having a law enforcement response to homeless concerns, we're sending out our second team. It's so far reduced responses by law enforcement to concerns about unhoused residents by 1,400 calls. So Port Team is out there in the streets. They're accessible to all of you. If you have concerns that we can, if you have concerns about somebody in your neighborhood, call us. We'll send our team out. They'll make contact. Many times they're already out working with them, but they're just resistant to services. But we continue to do what we can. In addition to that, it's really important for all of you to know that there are mental health services and resources in our community offered through LA County Department of Mental Health. And those services, the best service that I can tell you is to dial 988. So if you see somebody in mental health distress, but they're nonviolent, somebody standing on a street corner yelling profanities, you can dial 988. They'll send out a crisis response team and make contact with that individual. Those teams are different than what we do at Port because we're working with somebody who's before their crisis. But when somebody's yelling profanities or obviously they're going through something, an emotional distress, that's going to require professional psychologists that 988 can provide. If we have somebody who's violent, sometimes we have to engage the police department's HOPE team, which has a social worker as well as a law enforcement, and that is the appropriate resource if we're seeing somebody who's violent either for themselves or other people. And then I just wanted to make a quick note is that all of us have a responsibility for and are part of the solution for addressing the folks in our community that need resources. We're doing our best at the city to provide them the services and support, but we need all of your help to help us connect with them and to understand where they're located because we can't be everywhere all the time. So we really do appreciate your partnership.
Manuel, maybe I can just add a couple. There was a question about a timeline, so I want to try to be responsive to that. Some of it we don't know yet because they're still doing the assessment. But one of the things we can move on is park safety specialists. We actually only had 6 of them when I got here. In the last budget, we added 2 more, and I think they were hired as of March of this year, so we're up to 6. No, we're up to 8. We're up to 8 now. And what we've been working on over the weekend, this Monday and Tuesday, even today, is trying to move that up and add 3 more park safety specialists, bringing us up to 11, plus the civilian that the chief talked about. That'll be 12, and we think that's the right size that's needed, along with some coverage at night, later at night. So again, the goal is to bring it on December 11th. It's hard. Everything's more complicated than you think, trying to get everything together, but we're moving rapidly. And I want to say, just like we're moving rapidly on park safety specialists, we'll work rapidly when we get the assessment on lighting. The other thing I wanted to mention is just recently, maybe 3 weeks ago, we took ownership, the city did, of a parcel, about 2.5 acres at Villa and Lake, the former Kaiser site. And one of the reasons we did that is working in partnership with the County of Los Angeles. The county is the one that does mental health services. It's their responsibility. They have about $3 billion a year they spend on mental health. But we don't have mental health outpatient treatment services here in Pasadena, and we need to change that. So we worked in partnership with them. We're going to have 12,000 square feet for them to provide both mental health and medical outpatient treatment services. That's not all we need to do, but that's going to help to finally bring mental health services here to Pasadena. Thanks. And then finally, I think the chief wanted to say a couple of words about the HOPE team.
I think Director Carmona talked about it a little bit, but I just wanted to talk about the police department's partner to the Port team is our HOPE team, the Homeless Outreach and Psychological Evaluation team. It's a team that has law enforcement officer teamed up with a clinician, mental health clinician, so that when we're rolling out to these calls, they are the ones that are making first contact with folks who may be in crisis as we get those calls. So we're making efforts to ensure that it's not just a law enforcement handle, but certainly a combined approach to getting the services to those folks that need it. So I just want to make sure that you understood what that was. There's hope, and then there's port, and then everybody in the organization from a law enforcement perspective is trained in recognizing mental health crisis, and we have an annual training with regard to that. So I just want to pass that on to you folks.
Hi, Eddie Rivera, Pasadena now. My question is for you, Chief. A lot of talk about how quickly the suspect was apprehended, and you may not be able to answer this, but was there any one thing that led you particularly to that suspect?
Hard work by the detectives and investigators. I'll be able to give you more on that once the investigation is done, but what it really was an all-out effort at dropping everything and turning loose on this problem, because we saw it as a problem that was going to have many more people hurt if we didn't take this person off the street. So it was early recognition that this was a serial assaulter, and then having those guys turn to on catching them, and they did exactly what they were supposed to do.
My second quick question, and I don't know who gets this, but has there been any conversation about reconfiguring the park, maybe leveling the slope? You mentioned that the park is in kind of two sections, but has there been any conversation about that?
I'll hand that over to somebody who can answer that for you. But the other piece of the question that you asked me earlier, technology was a big part of that, and we'll start to reveal some of those things as the days come on.
Thanks.
So since I've been here and in talking to our staff, there hasn't been any discussion about doing anything like that. I mean, at some point, if there's some kind of study, like a master plan study, that'll be something that would be considered at that time.
Nothing wrong with the park.
Yeah. I think you can gauge by the reaction. Yeah. I wouldn't put my name on the ballot in this neighborhood and suggest that.
All right. I just, there was some discussion that there's hidden sections.
That's just a bit of advice for you, Eddie.
Yeah, good one. I'll keep that in mind. But hidden sections, maybe those can be limited. But if it's historic, say no more.
Pasadena, not now.
I get it. That's not necessary. All right. Thanks.
Betty?
Hi, Betty Sword. I have lived in the neighborhood for 33 years now, and I've been involved with the park for the last 20-some years, working with Friends of Washington Park. And a lot of things are going through my mind the last few days. I've read every single comment, I think, on Nextdoor, which is really gut-wrenching. And I'm really saddened how many people feel unsafe in Washington Park. And I am very sad at Mr. Cooper's passing, and when his brother said that he came to the park because he felt safe there, that kind of broke my heart a little bit, because he should feel safe there. Even if it was 4 a.m, we should all feel safe in our country, Regarding some of the issues that have come up, like the park safety specialists, I was on the Rec and Parks Commission for a number of years. We had 12 at one point, and then it went down to 0, 2, 3, 6, 8, down to whatever. I passed around a petition in our neighborhood during the budgeting cycle once, and immediately got something like 30, 40 signatures. We need more park safety specialists. I took it to the council, and they didn't approve increasing their budget at all. So get it up there, get it consistent, and make sure that people know that these people are going to be in their park patrolling it, and they'll feel safer there. And I'd also like to say that we do have a lot of people using Washington Park who do feel safe there, who bring their little children there. They bring little tots there. If you're up there Monday through Friday, there's usually a group of nannies and moms. They just had their Thanksgiving party up there. And so I'm willing to take anybody who wants to go on a tour through the park. I've done tours for, Friends of Washington Park has done tours for different community groups, and I just feel that it is a historic park, and it's a rich park, and we should be grateful that we have it in our community. And I've met new people who move here and say they're so happy to see this park. If you really walk around and look at it, it's gorgeous. And it's going to be more gorgeous when the community house is there. And I hope that we can use the grand opening as a chance for everybody to come together and meet each other, picnic, party in the park. And maybe we won't have to do this thing of taking back the park every 5 to 10 years because there's a crime that upsets people. So.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you, Betty. Barbara?
Good evening. I just wanted to speak a little bit about the history of the park and the people who designed it. It was designed by Ralph Cornell, who's one of the most distinguished American landscape architects, and Theodore Payne. And if you've ever had to do, if you've ever wanted to do a project with native anything, plantings, you're off and running to the Theodore Payne Foundation. And so we start out with something really remarkable. And then they designed the park so that it would be kind of a compressed central park, so that you had a lot of different kinds of experiences in the park. So that means that in order to exploit and harness those different zones with those different elevations, in order to help people feel safer, you can harness innovative lighting. For example, having motion detector path lighting, that rather than having like police like searchlights that like bear down on you, can you have a combination of path lighting that's motion detector and washing the upper trees that Ralph Cornell and Betty and people like that have tried so hard to work, so that you can celebrate the aesthetics and increase the safety simultaneously. And whoever did the new community center, congratulations, the craftsmanship and those front doors, superb.
Thank you, Barbara. Please.
I wanted to just pretty much get some straight answers that I came in to wanting to address to our mayor and our council people. I understand that there's budgets, so it's not easy. I know every year you got to manage your budgets, and not every year, and it's not easy in the middle of a year to actually implement some of these changes. But I want to hear straight and commitments directly from you, Mayor, and to our council people, because we will remember when we receive the ballots in the mail, how you respond. Will you install cameras in Washington Park? Will you improve lighting at Washington Park? And will you increase police presence after hours at Washington Park at a reasonable time within 1 year?
Yeah, you know, the budgeting thing, let me just say this, and Betty alluded to it. When budget season comes around, I'm going to ask again that people show up at the budget hearings and support our efforts, because it was a couple of years ago, and Betty was there and some of you were there, when we asked the city council to increase the number of park safety specialists back to 12. When we asked that the investment be made for the clubhouse years ago. That clubhouse has been, for many of you who know, years in the making. And so is my commitment there? Absolutely it is, to increase safety in all of the ways that you described, so long as they're effective.
Within 1 year?
So long as they're effective, my commitment is there to put it in the budget season. Now, the timing is up to the professionals. I can't tell you that they're able to put up lights within 6 months, a year, but I suspect that issues like lighting, yes. Other issues, we'll have to, what was the lighting and?
Lighting,
and cameras.
Police
yes.
Cameras and increased police presence after hours, of course.
Yeah, and the police chief is in charge of policing, and so he can address the issue of policing and the response that's already occurred.
And my last question too, I wanted to be clear, is what type of cameras would we be receiving? For example, there's cameras that after the fact you go and review after maybe a crime occurs, and then the police could then review those. But what we really would like is actually live monitored cameras that that the police is actually monitoring live. And so when they see something, they don't have to wait for a 911 call. They don't have to wait for a citizen to call. They actually see via those cameras because they're monitoring them at all times, and then they send people ahead of time. We're actually proactive instead of being reactive.
Well, that's part of our public park safety officer strategy. We currently have cameras at some of our other parks that came as a result of some things that occurred at those parks.
That you monitor?
That we monitor.
Are currently monitoring?
That we are currently monitoring. So it is just a process. There are 26 some odd parks in the town It does take some time to get things implemented. There's prioritization that has to take place and all of those things. So what I will tell you is, yes, we're going to do those things. What I can't tell you is that it's going to take place in a particular time frame, but we are addressing today, solving those problems as quick as humanly possible so that we don't have another issue. So from a police department perspective, those things are immediate. Right? Those things right away do not require budgets to be done or any of those kind of things. I just simply need to take the responsibility of making sure we're putting people in the parks at the times that we need to be there, and that analysis has already started.
I think that, oh, one more. And the last question, and then we'll just, oh, I'm sorry. 2 half questions.
Bear with me. Good evening. The young man that we're referring to was my cousin, Mickey. Mickey, he was a good person. When I found out what happened to him, it broke my heart in pieces. I just want to address that Mickey, he wasn't without housing. Mickey was on drugs. So with that aspect, I guess you do whatever you want to do. As far as food, I think these are the things that drug addicts normally, do to make someone feel sorry for them so they can get money to go buy more drugs. So he was an adult and he chose to do what he wanted to do. We did try to get him help, which he did go in for. He went in for about 10 days and then he came, he just walked away. So my father, his uncle, we didn't have interventions. We just talked to him about this because we know his heart. We know he had a good heart. And we just that was just the one thing that we wanted him to do, was to get off of the drugs. Now, the day that I found out this happened, my sister and I went to the park. I'm a native of Pasadena, born and raised, but I've lived in Arcadia for the last 20 years. So my sister and I went to the park, and we noticed that there were cameras on the top part around on those buildings. I took a few pictures, so I went downstairs, and we looked around, and I said, I guess there's no cameras here. So I took pictures of the street cameras. I don't know what the street cameras, if they blend over the park or anything, but I was just wondering, had cameras been down there, would you have caught this young man faster? And also, this guy was young, and I know he didn't just wake up one day and decide to do these things to people. I do appreciate the quickness of how you caught him, but I do believe he's probably responsible for some other crimes. You'll probably get that later after the investigation, but I honestly believe he had caused problems somewhere else. And what not angers me, but what bothers, I guess it is bother. What bothers me is when a person commits a crime and he's still running around, running wild. Why can't they find him and pick him up before something more tragic happens? I know you guys do your best, and my cousin told me to tell you again that he appreciates everything Pasadena has done, and Mayor, the people that you have behind you, we appreciate that, absolutely. But I'm concerned about why it took something this terrible to catch him when he had done several other things before this last thing.
Sometimes it's difficult from an evidentiary perspective, certainly from an operational perspective, to ensure that we can take action against somebody that's provable and actionable. So while we're doing those things, unfortunately, unlike TV where we have evidence that has to be processed, sometimes that evidence takes weeks, months, and we have to wait for that to come back in order for us to take the next step. In this case, one of the things that happened was we arrested him for an assault that was at this gas station before we ever charged him with murder. We arrested him for that assault while we were working the murder case. And so he was in custody. We did that because our detectives determined that that was the safest way to go for people in the community. Let's get him into custody and hope that the other evidence gets done in a timely fashion where we can hold him. So we do that from time to time. We try to consider other ways to remove people from the street. Some of the ways we do is we monitor them. We want to make sure through the probation department and those kind of things that we know where they are. But in all cases, I'd insult your intelligence if I told you we were able to take action in every case that would prevent these things. That would be utopia for us, and I would really love that. Unfortunately, it just doesn't happen that way in real time sometimes.
Yeah, I do understand that, and I know this isn't TV, and I know things don't, like 48 hours, I know they don't, happen in 3 days.
I wish it did, but we'd be really
nice.
good.
Right, but I just have a concern that this young man caused havoc before, and I know you said you had spot shotters or shot spotters for that first incident when you got there, the young man that was injured. You wonder why couldn't you find some evidence then, or it just seems to me that more can be done about getting these people off the streets before they commit something more heinous like they did with my cousin.
We're constantly working on improving at getting those things done, improving the technology. Sometimes would-be criminals and crooks get smarter too, and so we have to figure out how to overcome that. And so those are the things that we're working on.
Okay. And I appreciate the moment of silence that everyone took for my cousin. Thank you.
Thank you, and we're all very sorry for your family's loss.
I love Washington Park. I walk my dogs in that park every single day, almost, and I feel really safe. Of course, I'm not doing it at 2 in the morning, but given that, I talk to people when I see people. I see a lot of people that walk through the park, and if someone looks a little unusual, they leave them alone. They don't say anything. I think that's a big mistake. I think if someone's in the park, they love the park too. Maybe they're smoking pot, maybe they're playing handball, maybe they're with little kids, but when you're in the park, communicate with the other people at the park. Don't just sort of go on your solitary way, because I think that's what makes us human to each other. And I'm sure I talked to your cousin, because I talk to everybody. And it's never been a bad result for me. Now, the thing about fences, I would really prefer it if there are no fences, because there are times when I'm walking the dog and perhaps there's a kind of scary dog, or maybe somebody that looks like they're having a mental health problem, and without a fence, I can just scoot to the other side of the street, or I can scoot out to the sidewalk. If there's a fence there, I feel less safe, because then I can't get out. I'm really trapped. So please don't put fences in. I don't think fences or walls really work that well in our country anyway. But I just wanted, and the last thing I want to say is that when I was in college in Oregon, we would go down to Ashland to see Shakespeare. And we were broke college kids, so we had this brilliant idea. We would sleep in Lydia Park, and then we would get up the next day and go home. Well, those people in the Parks Department in Ashland had this brilliant idea where at 2 in the morning, these rainbirds went on. And so there we are, all sleeping in our tent, and all of a sudden we hear this chuk, 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 and we are completely drenched, and you've never seen kids run out of a park so fast. So I'm thinking, maybe not rainbirds, maybe something that's motion detected, but it was very effective. Anyway, thank you. I'm sure I've seen a lot of the policemen there. I've seen everybody. But just, it's a safe park. And there's lots of different people that use it. And I'm really sorry about the shooting. And I think it's a problem we can solve.
Thank you. So let me, Mr. Farr?
Good evening. First of all, to the Cooper family, my condolences.
for the loss of your loved one. I have two questions, Mayor. One for Mr. Marquez as well as Chief Harris. But first, I would like to say, this year I've awakened to 3 of our unhoused community members on my porch. And so when I hear, and I'm sure the chief can expound on this at a later date, but when I hear language around our unhoused and our mentally ill as being diabolical, I have no doubt, sir, that you've seen the worst of humanity. All of you have in your profession, right? And while I'm not trying to garner up sympathy for the perpetrator, I'm confident that your officers have done a thorough investigation and have apprehended the right person. So we do, as a community, thank you for well usage of our $100 million budget that we fund for the department. My question for first the city manager is, how will increased park safety officers in the wee hours of the night better afford safety for the community? Is 24-hour surveillance or security something that's being explored? And then my question for Chief is, would you retract those statements about him being diabolical unless you're able to provide us with a little bit more detail?
On your first question to me, I will have to defer to the police chief, only because when the idea came up, my first call is to the chief. And they say, hey, chief, is this going to be helpful to you? Can you make good use of those resources? So I have to defer to my experts because I'm not expert in all things, and I know that. The second thing I'll say quickly is I was at the press conference where that term was used. It was used not to describe mental illness, but it was used as a term to say there was no motive. That's one of the reasons it was hard to find this person, because he had committed more than one crime, a serial crime, and there was no motive that connected those crimes. So when asked, why did they do it? He said, we don't know. There's no motive that connects it. He's just diabolically evil. That's where that term came from. It doesn't have to relate to his mental illness, but to the fact that there was no motive for these crimes. But let me turn it over to the police chief because I deferred to him on that question.
So I appreciate the question. Additionally, with regard to that answer, no, I won't retract it. It was said it was appropriate for the time that we were having that discussion, and the fact is that is really for us the only way when we don't have any connection between victims, witnesses, the suspect, or any of those kind of things to describe that type of behavior. And so it had nothing to do with homeless. Our suspect was not homeless, and so we don't want to confuse or conflate those two issues. As far as the park safety issue is concerned, I do believe that additional staffing will allow us to spread the schedule, will allow us to be more creative and effective in when and where we have people in the park. A presence in the park, like anything else, will create a disincentive for criminal behavior and activity. We don't want to go into the park and just simply, start arresting everybody, because we can't arrest our way out of a lot of the problems that we have. But the presence and the ability to get people services at different hours and direct them in places to make it so that maybe there's a little more comfortable situation that we can put people in, which is a little more humane than sleeping out in the cold or sleeping out in the rain. That is what the hope is. And so park safety does a lot more than just enforcement, as do our officers. Again, we start with those E's. There's education, there's engineering, and then there's enforcement. We want to make sure we're educating people about services and other things that are available to them, and having people out in the parks at that time of the night when the people that we need to deal with are there. That's when we can get that information across. So ideally, we'll manage it. We'll manage the scheduling. We'll manage the deployment, and make sure that it's the most effective as it can be.
Chief, can you tell us what time frame do the park close, or does it ever close?
10 o'clock till 6 is typically what our muni code says. Well, that's when we need to get a call so we can come and shoo them away.
Well, you know what? How can you call when they don't respond?
If you're not getting the response you need, call me directly.
What's your phone number?
Area code 626 744 4545.
Okay. So as you can see, and back to I think Betty and James Farr and others have raised it. It is a comprehensive approach. You know, and we ought to be proud of our city because we're leading the way in the comprehensive approach. You know, the issue of mental health. You know, we've made the investment and we've committed to pulling in, and the county has committed to coming in to provide mental health and health services at that Kaiser site. And, you know, I've been around long enough, and some of you have been there, where there were actually elected members of the city council who said we should not invest in technology. We should not invest in more public safety personnel. We should not invest in more park safety specialists. Now, that should not be our only investment, but we should always ensure that we have the appropriate staffing in all of those areas. As we look to provide more programming in the park, another thing that we're doing is providing that community house to provide that those activities in the park that are positive, that we're all talking about. And it's not just for young people, it's for all people to have art classes and I don't know, I won't go through all the programming, but that's the goal, to have a community house that activates the park, to have a well-staffed public safety program, and to ensure that we make the physical improvements that we all know are needed. But the gentleman who asked the questions, are we committed to doing it within a reasonable timeline? I'm going to ask again for your assistance when the time comes to ask members of the city council to put the resources into staffing, to put the resources into those improvements and into programming. Please respond, even if it's in writing, and tell your member of the city council and the staff that those investments are worthy in order to prevent situations like this. So with that, if there are no other questions, oh, and thank you to Natalie for being here, because we shouldn't forget our private sector partners, the nonprofits, and Lisa Cavalier was here from the Boys and Girls Club earlier tonight, and she may still be here. But our private partnerships with Crime Stoppers and the Boys and Girls Clubs and other organizations are also important. So with that, thank you all for being here and taking an interest. And thank you to the police department and, I'm sorry? Oh, yeah. And thank you to the police department, the police officers, and all city staff, and especially thank you to my colleagues, and I'll let them say good night as well.
Thank you all for being here, and I'll pass it over to my colleague, Councilmember Rivas.
Thank you. I'm going to stick around. Also, be sure to grab my business card on the way out. It's got my cell number. Feel free to always shoot me a text, shoot me an email. I'm up very late responding to those. So thank you all.